Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining the seminar. We'll just wait until we've got some more people. Yes, please use the chat because I think you're all muted. And there's also a question and answer that you can use at the same time as well. We'll give it a minute or so. We've got lots of people who are bookmarked to come, so we don't want to start without them. How are you all this morning? I hope you're all doing well. And has anyone had to get cover to come this morning? Yes. Me too. Sometimes getting cover is more trouble than it's worth, isn't it? You wonder whether they're actually going to do what you've asked them to do, or whether you'll end up coming back to lots and lots of strange sheets with scribbles all over them, or something completely different, like a science lesson. Hello to Charlie from Chepstow. Fantastic. Is everybody in England, or we have people from, where is everybody from? Romania, how exciting. And in London, Durham, Sheffield, wow, we've got people from from Galicia, how wonderful. This is amazing. Working in Dubai. This is such a, bringing the real world to the webinar. We're all over the world, aren't we? Oh, and in Kent, a good place to be as well. I think we will get started. So if anybody joins afterwards, we can say hello to them. And obviously it is live streamed and can be viewed afterwards as well. So I'm going to start off, I'm just going to do a screen share. Please do point out if you can't see what I'm sharing, or for some reason it's not working. These things do have a tendency to go wrong, don't they, when you're live? So I'll start off and hope that it's all going to be okay. Ooh. I didn't click the advanced things about optimizing for video. So sorry about that. There we go. So welcome to bringing the real world into the classroom this morning. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you'll find the session useful. Please do use the question and answer function throughout, and I'll have a look at the end and answer as many as I can at the end, rather than stopping in the middle, because I'll probably lose my train of thought. If you want to chat amongst yourself on the chat, please do that as well. I know as a teacher that teachers are the worst at being in insets and doing training. So please do feel free to chat while it's going on. So my name is Madeline Handaji. I currently teach French and Spanish at Port Regis School in Dorset, where I'm also a member of the SLT as head of upper school. So although I now work in the private sector, over the course of my career, I have worked in international schools with adult refugees in France and Greece, and state schools, from EYFS to A-level, and with underprivileged children in Morocco. I've also gained experience in journalism with a focus on North African geopolitics, obviously all the time using my language skills. So today's session will use examples from my current setting, as well as some A-level topics, and I will be focusing on French, but these should be transferable to any setting and any language. So let's get started with bringing the real world into the classroom. So how many times, let's have a look at the chat thing, say me, if you've been asked, if we can, yes, Ben, you can watch it afterwards. It's that these are live they're recorded, but you can access them with your event ticket afterwards. So can you just make a mark on the chat webinar if you've ever been asked, can't I just use Google Translate? Or what's the point in learning languages? What's the point in French? What's the point in Spanish? Me, yes, me. Yeah. So everybody, we get these questions all the time. And it's really, really, really hard to answer, particularly in a world with technologies like ChatGPT, live interpretation software. These questions are increasingly difficult to answer, but I know that's why you're here. We all agree that there are so many reasons to continue promoting languages in schools. So many reasons. And one key way of doing this is through bringing the real world into the classroom and showing our pupils the value of human interaction, live communication, and an open-minded, curious view of the world. Languages, or in a way, person-to-person communication without the assistance of translation or technology, can lead to careers in journalism, conflict resolution, conservation, politics, education, even more. And these are all world-changing sectors. And I think our pupils deserve to understand the impact on change that they could have given the proper tools. Now, I believe very strongly that we have a responsibility as teachers and as linguists to make languages accessible and alive for our students. And rather than fighting against changing technologies, we can actually harness it and use it in different ways to showcase the power of human interaction and to showcase what's going on with languages all over the world. But my aim with my pupils is for them to understand that an online translation tool will never help them to, for example, track elephants in the Sahel. It won't transport them to an oil ship off Côte d'Ivoire as an engineer or a peacekeeping meeting in Western Sahara. And it will not, and this is the key thing, forge dynamic human connections with real people. And that is what languages are all about. So as MFL teachers, I imagine you all feel the same. Please do tell me if you don't. We recycle topics year after year. The curriculums lend themselves to repetitions of introductions. Je m'appelle Brian, j'ai 12 ans, over and over again. Holidays, house and home, the contents of our pencil cases. And I think even as teachers, sometimes we get a bit bored. But we can bring these topics to life while opening a door via languages to worlds and ideas that can inspire and excite our pupils. So enough of the background, because I think just by being here, you probably agree with me anyway. So let's have a walk through some of the things that I do in the classroom to try to bring the real world into my lessons and to inspire the children to think about languages as something dynamic, something alive, and something that has an impact on the world. So we're going to look at 4 categories, which is a tiny amount, but obviously 45 minutes isn't very long. And if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A and I will address as much as I can at the end. So let's have a look at the categories. So we're going to look at, like the learning objectives at the beginning of the lesson, target language music, videos and interviews from Francophone countries, charity drives and emergency response, and finally, the way to most children's hearts, food. So let's get started with number 1. I have to admit that I am not very good at keeping up with modern music. When I was at school, I remember being really excited and enthused by my teachers introducing us to Stromae through gap fills, or Manu Chao to teach us about the verb gustar in Spanish. This is a really common tool, and I think we probably all use this, but it can be taken even further to enhance real world engagement. So let's have a look at that. Now, my next example might be something you all do already, but this is a singer who I came across because I used to teach Sudanese refugees in France. So Sudanese men who had got residency in France, and they really struggled with understanding French, spoken French, in a French accent, but they found that Francophone accents from Africa were much easier to understand. So they introduced me to a Cote d'Ivoirean singer called called Tikenja Fakoly. And Tikenja Fakoly, I adore him. I saw him live in Casablanca once, and it was incredible. He's so much energy, and he has become absolutely invaluable to me in the classroom as a tool for grammar and things like that, but also as a tool for getting children excited and introducing them to something a little bit different, a little bit new. So this is a lesson example looking at present tense revision and introductions. Now, I did this with what we call B form, which is year 7, but I think you could probably do this at GCSE and even at A level if you want to take it further and look at it more in depth. So this is we start with obviously revision of the present tense, and I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs. You all know how to do that, conjugations, exercises. Then we come to the gap fill, and this gap fill is a bit interesting because it doesn't only have French in it, it also has another language. So let's listen to a bit of it. My children love this, so I hope you will too.
Trop de blabla, j'entends trop de blabla. Et tout ce que j'entends, tout ce qu'il raconte, moi je n'y crois pas. Little America.
So after listening to that, we did a gap fill. We looked at the present tense conjugations, of which there are several. Nice third person plural, which is always a bit tricky because obviously in French it's silent at the end. And the children really were fascinated by the other language that was spoken. So we talked about tribal languages in Cote d'Ivoire, and then we talked about the meaning, what he was actually singing about. So there was some translation from French to English. We also did some research about the native language he was speaking. And what they were fascinated about was that while it's a lovely, fun song, it's actually very sad. It's incredibly sad. And it's about being disillusioned with politics. And this brought up lots of discussions. And I'm talking about 11-year-olds here who were really excited about Tikenja Fakoly. So excited that rather than doing what I'd initially planned, which was just doing a short biography. So we researched using computers, but you could do this as a reading comprehension for higher level because there are some fantastic texts about Tikenja Fakoly. And I think what's interesting about him is because he is a political singer, every language has, really interesting, dynamic political singers because music is an art form that links so much to culture, but it also links to politics and real world issues. And every language, there are singers who sing in every language on these topics. So it's something that's very transferable. So what I planned for them to do was for them to do some research and then write a short biography in the present tense. So this is an example of what they came up with. Very simple because they're 11. He's a singer. He's using the verb to be, basic biography things, so talking about what they look like, where they're from. So rather than doing that normal introductions, I'm called Sally and I'm from Milton Keynes, we're talking about someone else. And actually that already makes it more dynamic and more real for the children because they've done that introduction over and over and over again. So this hopefully makes it a bit more exciting. But my children were so excited about Tikenja Fakoly, they actually learnt his song off by heart and created their own radio show about world music, which we'll listen to a bit of now. And the radio show involves children in year 7. It also involves a child from nursery who happens to be speak French as a first language, and they brought him in to interview him. So let's have a listen just to the beginning, because it's very long, but I will add a link to it at the end because it might be something to inspire your pupils with. I have to apologize to the French teachers out there for the very, very, very poor pronunciation, but as you can see, they're very excited, and the effort they went to do this shows massive engagement, and they were inspired by that little clip from a song, and it shows really what an impact doing something a little bit different can have. So let's have a look. Hopefully this will work. That would be very embarrassing if it didn't. Oh, something's happening.
Bonjour pour Regis, nous sommes Penny
et Violette.
Et on veut présenter le World Languages Programme.
Aujourd'hui, on va parler d'un grand chanteur de la musique reggae.
Mais il est beaucoup plus que chanteur, il est politicien, écrivain, compositeur et compositeur.
Sa musique traite surtout de la politique du monde africain francophone.
Il s'appelle Tiken Jah Fakoly.
Alors, qui est Tiken Jah Fakoly?
Il est né en Côte d'Ivoire en 1968 et il a lancé son premier groupe de musique reggae en 1987.
Toute sa musique parle de peu africain et d'oppression. Actuellement, il est réfugié politique en France. Reste en
Oh, sorry, I've paused by mistake.
Paroles de ses chansons.
On veut Romain aujourd'hui en ces Amoréens éthiopiens pour vous parler de grands chanteurs.
Comment tu t'appelles?
Sven. Quel âge as-tu?
Qui est ton chanteur préféré?
Pas mal Tiken Jah Fakoly.
Alors, tu adores le reggae. Quelle chanson de Tiken Jah aimais-tu le plus?
Ich werde von sein.
Moi aussi, j'adore ces chansons.
So we're going to stop there and move on to the next topic. But you can see how the real engagement there with a topic that is quite old hat, and obviously we have to do because it's part of the curriculum, but there are ways of making it more real, and making it about somebody who isn't them. And now this particular time we did it with Tiken Jah Fakoly. Sometimes I make up real people. I give them a little card with a fake name on it, and it's normally someone from a different part of the world, and they have to research that part of the world and learn about what that person's life might be like. And it just makes everything a bit more dynamic, everything a bit more real, and a bit more relevant, I think, to the children, because we have to always remember that while we're teaching a subject, we're teaching children first, and that has to be the most important thing. So I hope that was interesting, and that little baby voice was very, very cute, but it goes on for a very long time, and I'm not going to inflict 15 minutes on you of my children talking about reggae. So moving on to our next topic. Our next topic is house and home. And again, this is one that we do over and over again. And I don't know about you, but I always feel a bit weird about saying to teenagers, tell me what's in your bedroom. So I quite like to try and make this about other people's houses, because there is an uncomfortableness about there is an element of the uncomfortable, isn't there, about the house and home, and it can, depending on the setting you're in, become quite tense. People embarrassed, comparisons, and in order to avoid that, I always think it's better to use other examples. But again, this is a wonderful way of bringing in the real world and real life problems. So let's have a look. This particular project that I'm going to show you actually links to STEAM really beautifully. So if you do have a good STEAM department or technology department in your school or in your setting, or actually if you're just that way inclined and you want to do some cutting and sticking, I'm not very good at that, so I like to leave it to other people. But if you are, this is a lovely way of getting a bit of cross-curricular involvement. So house and home vocabulary. So obviously in your first lesson, you've got to do the background with all of these things, with bringing the real world into the classroom, of looking at authentic materials. We always have to do the background first. So introducing the rooms in the house, call and response, all of the things that I know you will all do, because that's what good teachers do. And this particular one, I want to look at the particular structure, depuis, so since in French. So this needs the understanding of that particular structure. So from there, obviously the usual thing we do would be to read some things and listen to some recordings from the textbook. But I thought it would be more interesting to have a look at a country in a francophone country in Africa called Chad, where recently there's been significant flooding, causing huge swathes of the population to have to move out of their homes. So I talked to my class about Chad and about the flooding there and the impact on the people. And again, you can do this with this could all be done in the target language if prepared carefully. And then we looked at some interviews with Chadian refugees who have been left homeless with their families due to the flooding. So the questions, that's quite difficult because obviously their French is not perfect. But then again, I think that's really important to show children that your French doesn't have to be perfect. It's all about communication. So I'll play you 2 little clips that I've used with the children. And so there are some examples on the side of questions that you could ask, but obviously it depends what you're doing, it depends on the level, but sort of the ideas are there, and the questions can be very specific or the questions can be very open depending on the level that you're working at.
On tient les coups malgré nous.
Vraiment?
Si, si.
C'est comment?
C'est lamentable d'être à cet état, mais
Ah,
on est obligé de faire parce que c'est à cause des catastrophes naturelles, donc on le supporte.
oui. Et comme ça, vous êtes juste ici dans le champ là.
Si. C'est depuis le 13 octobre qu'on est là,
Ah,
jusqu'à
ah.
aujourd'hui.
Jusqu'à aujourd'hui.
Si.
Et vous êtes combien ici?
Le nombre général des sinistrés ou bien c'est juste ma famille à moi?
Ton famille, hein?
Non, le nombre de 8.
8.
Si.
Et maintenant, ça c'est
nos effets.
ça c'est les effets qui restent de l'inondation. Et qui sont les problèmes pour vous dans ton famille?
We'll have another look at another clip. Similar thing, the same situation. But this one, I think, lends itself more to a lower level.
Ça va? Moi, je m'appelle Henry. Moi, c'est Henry. Vous êtes? Ernestine, enchantée. Merci. Et vous êtes ici combien de jours déjà?
On est 14.
14 jours.
Non, on est depuis le temps.
Ah, depuis
I use this with this particular thing. I'm actually using with A form, which is year 8 for us. So it's not very, but I have used similar things with much older students. Sorry, I said I would answer the questions at the end, but I'm rushing in. So we'll watch a little bit more of.
Depuis le 14, le mois passé. Ok. C'est ça. Et maintenant, les problèmes sont quoi pour vous ici?
On n'a pas de couverture. Les enfants, là, beaucoup sont beaucoup malades. On n'a pas d'argent pour les soigner.
Oui.
C'est grâce à Père que je suis en train de soigner mes enfants. Là,
So there she's, if you don't speak French, she's talking about how long she's been in the camp, and she says that one of the problems she has is that the children are ill. She later goes on to say that they can't go to school, which brings us on to the next thing. So the outcome of that was that I asked my children to design, written a house for Ernestine. And it's quite simple. So they say in the house, there's a kitchen, there's a living room, there are a bathroom, there are bedrooms, and so each child did something slightly different. And they also drew a picture because they love to draw a picture. But then we actually took it even further. So you could stop there, but we actually took it even further. And it became part of a project where the children spent a morning designing a house for Ernestine that was flood-proof. So that's another way of making it really real. But obviously they had to engage on a personal level because those people, they don't have access to technology. So if you can't speak to them, you're stuck. So in little ways showing that those languages can be really impactful, and that just basic communication. We'll talk a bit about the guy who's interviewing them later, but obviously his French isn't perfect either, which I think is really nice for the children to see. So we'll move on because the time is going much more quickly than I thought it would. So let's have a look at school and daily routine. So this particular one, again, it's one that we do all the time. We recycle it and it becomes quite tiresome for the children, I think, and obviously there's that bit they love giving opinions about their teachers and saying, oh, I hate my maths teacher because he's boring, or they love that. But again, there are ways of making it a bit more exciting. And one of them is, of course, looking at things like charity drives. So you can do like, what are they called? We've been doing it at school and it's gone completely out of my mind, sorry. The shoebox campaigns. What do children need in a school? So talking about what you're putting in your shoebox and actually doing it actively. Shoebox campaigns, emergency response to things in schools. Another thing that I found that my children really, really enjoy, and this is, I've used resources from Latin America for this, but dangerous journeys to school. So rather than talking about, oh, I go in the car with my dad, real people's journeys to school, and it can be really fascinating. And you can look at that across the globe. And again, in home languages. And sometimes I previously worked in a boys' school in central London where most of the children were from Nigeria, and they talked about how their parents had walked to school, and that was really, really interesting. And I do have currently a child who lives in Kenya who's at boarding school, who used to go to school on a camel, and the other children didn't believe him, but it is true. So having a look at school and daily routine. So obviously there is always that vocabulary and structures that you have to go through. We've said this before, repetition games, and then we go on to describe your school. So this is a comparison activity that I did with the children that they found, I think, quite shocking. So we talked about our own school, we described our own school, and then we watched this video, which I'm not sure is going to work. Let's see. Oh, I have to stop screen sharing and share a different screen. I'm very sorry, I'm not very good at this. Oh, what's going on? There we go. We're screen sharing a different screen now, which, is it coming on? Yes, it is. There we go, screen sharing a different screen. I showed them this video of a school in Casablanca, which is actually where I worked for a while, with preschool age children who don't have access to state education. We don't really need the sound, but we can have it anyway. So this is it, that shows, the clip shows where they are at school. It shows their school, shows me and my husband, that's nice. And the day in the life at school, and you can see the classrooms are very different from what children in the majority of our settings would be used to. The children come in their own clothes because they don't have a uniform, but they come in their party clothes because they're so proud of being at school, which is something that I think sometimes our children could learn from. We won't watch the whole thing, but I can share a link to that, and we'll go back to our presentation, which is there. So the next thing we did on that project was comparing our school to that school. So in my school there is, in the school in Morocco there is. So on a very basic level, the children used the target language, used the language that we were working on to kind of do a comparison. Il n'y a pas de. And obviously that's very basic, and I did that with D-form, who are year 5. But then I've previously done it with older pupils who came up with to use the subjunctive. So what should the children have? Il faut que les enfants au Maroc aillent. So we used the same thing, but obviously your outcomes and your expectations are higher. Again, I'm rushing through because we are very, very conscious of time. So the last thing we're going to talk about is food. Food, obviously, the children, the way to their hearts is often through their stomachs. And it can be complicated to cook in schools, and there are allergies, and it is a minefield, but it is worth persevering and trying to find ways around it, because these lessons will be the ones that the children remember. And also food is a fundamental part of sharing and exploring culture. I think lots of, when you go to a new country, one of the first things that will happen when you make a connection with someone was you'll share food with them. And so I think bringing food into language is actually a hugely valuable tool. So obviously this depends on facilities in your setting, but I do think it can be done. I've done it in a state school in central London. I've done it in a refugee camp with only, so it can be done if you really, really want to. So let's have a look. So I'm doing this actually currently with some really little people. I'm doing this with year 4 at the moment. So we're starting off with really basic things. I like, I don't like, I really like, and then these are things I just found on the internet. So not all of your resources have to be extraordinary. So we're introducing likes and dislikes and foods and encouraging the children to express themselves. And again, talking about food is always something children like. And then I asked that's my mother-in-law to and some other people to do some recordings about food in Moroccan culture that they like and dislike. So we'll listen to them. They're very, very simple. And I got these through WhatsApp from just friends through WhatsApp. So it was a really, really quick way of accessing it.
J'aime la pastilla de poisson, mais j'aime pas le tagine de poisson.
J'adore le tagine de poisson, je déteste la bissara.
There we go. I hate bissara as well. It's split pea soup.
j'aime le tagine, المحنشة, البصارة.
So after getting the children to listen to real people who speak French in a francophone country, talking about what foods they like, and they're different foods, they're foods that the children have never experienced before, we then looked at trying them. And so I'm very lucky because in my school we do have a domestic science room, and I also have access to equipment and things like that. So I was able to make and of course a hygiene certificate. I was able to make things for them to try, and then they were able to express opinions on the same things that these people have expressed opinions on. And again, this is quite complex, and it was a big thing to organize, but it doesn't have to be. I've done it before with quesadilla, with churros, with really basic things that are not that difficult to, and beignet, not that difficult to come by, and are less sort of worrying in terms of allergies. But what was great after this, he's still talking. No! Make them stop. Okay, moving on to the next one. So there are the foods that they talked about. They talked about melochia, which I got the children to try, and of course they all hated it. I love it. This split pea soup, hensha, which is a lovely pudding, which they really enjoyed. And then we actually learned how to make Moroccan bread. And we've done it on a campfire with little ones, and we've done it inside. And again, forest school, that was a forest school thing. We did making Moroccan bread on a campfire in forest school. And even most primary schools have a forest school these days. So it is doable if you really, really want to. And the children really loved expressing their opinions on it. And we found that there was a huge amount of engagement. So the outcomes, they expressed their opinions on foods using a range of structures. There's a lot enhanced engagement in modern foreign languages, which is obviously what we all want. And finally, we have curious and excited language learners. So that brings us to the end of my examples. And I hope that that's inspired you, or at least given you an idea or two about how to bring real world into the classroom. I will share all the videos and resources used in the lesson in the resource section. And please do try them out, or try equivalents in the languages that you teach. So most of my real world resources are from contacts and friends in Francophone countries in Africa, but I do often use my former Sudanese students with residency in France, and I ask them for little video clips and things like that. But there are lots of things available online if you search, and I know we're all really busy, and it's really hard to kind of spend hours trawling through YouTube, but it is worth it. And I do that a lot as well, particularly for Spanish, because I don't have as many people on tap to send me videos. So we're nearly at the end of the webinar, but I thought it'd be really useful to share an example of someone who I know who has gone from a language learner to a world changer as a source of inspiration. So Henry Bailey, we'll come on to who he is later. He failed GCSE French. He was not engaged by language learning in a classroom. And even at a highly academic school with the best teachers, he was not interested. However, at 18, he traveled to Kenya, and he saw the work of a charity called the Grasslands Trust, which was informed by a careful understanding of the Pokot language and culture. And this charity had been hugely successful where other organizations had failed. And Henry was really inspired by this real world linguistic engagement, and he restarted his language journey, first with GCSE Spanish during his A-levels, then with a language degree. And he has since learned Swahili and French as an autodidact, as well as numerous dialects of Arabic. He has just launched a conservation NGO in collaboration with the Chadian government. He speaks French and Arabic every day as part of his job, and travels to remote areas all over the Sahel with no access to Wi-Fi or translation software, using his language skills on a daily basis. So this is how he describes his career. I think this is a really fascinating thing to share with children, if you have children who are a little bit disengaged, or maybe think that it's not relevant to them. So he says, I began my career as an army officer in the Queen's Gurkha Engineers, having commissioned from Sandhurst. I commanded 30 Nepalese combat engineers who had the skills to build, fit and finish an entire house and fight. Together with my troops, we would speak Nepali, eat curry by hand, and alongside my corporals, I would stuff Nepali chewing tobacco into my gums. I trained to analyze information and make plans to find bombs, booby traps, and illicit weapons caches. I left the army as a captain, and with the aspiration to work in wildlife and habitat conservation, moved to Kenya, where I started a sustainable consultancy business. In Kenya, my first contract was to build a mobile tented camp in the famous Masai Mara Wildlife Reserve. Arriving on site, we were surrounded by a sea of black. It was almost a million wildebeest. I'm not really sure what they are. In the bush, I learned Swahili, built eco camps, hosted safaris, organized grand events, consulted security, sustainability, and business operations in protected areas. Living under canvas, I fell asleep to the roar of lions and the bass belly laugh of hippos. Aged 18, I first saw African elephant in the wilds of northern Kenya. In 2017, during the national elections, the same area became a battleground as politically incited militias occupied smallholder farms and conservancies and attempted to drive out the local electorate and register to vote in their place. Instability led to violence, killings, and widespread environmental destruction as poachers moved in to kill wildlife. I became operations manager for one of these conservancies a few days after it was invaded, though through developing diplomacy through language, security, business with local communities, including an agricultural show for nomads, bringing on partners and restructuring finances, we gained the integrity of the conservancy, safeguarding the environment and the local economy for this generation and the next. So it goes on, there's more, but this is the bit that I'm really interested in, that I want to share with you. I was brought up and educated in England and attended the University of Edinburgh to study Arabic and Persian language. As such, I was lucky enough to live in an 11th century high-rise in the ancient capital of Yemen, Sana'a, and also in Tehran, the vivacious and paradoxical capital of Iran. Bridging cultural differences was more than just learning languages, but a different way of living. I will share the link to his work, which you may show to any pupils who are potentially interested in careers in engineering, the military, conservation, or simply want to explore and be excited by that different way of living. And I hope that we can all try and give that different way of living, or sort of give a view of that different way of living to our pupils in the classroom through all of the exciting and extraordinary things that we do. So I will have a look at questions now. We've got about 5 minutes. I do have one person with their hand up. Sorry, I didn't notice. It says guest, would you like to speak? Oh, no. Ask to unmute. Never mind. I'll have a look at the questions then. Q&A. So yes, I will. Louise says, will I share the links to the videos? Absolutely. The PowerPoint is as a PDF in the resources section. I can't upload it as a PowerPoint, unfortunately, because the file is too big. And I will also put links to any of the videos that are online, and to the profile, the NGO of the gentleman I was just talking about, because that's really fascinating and really just shows for children what you can do with languages. Do I have any advice for finding amazing, authentic videos if you don't have contacts in other countries? That's a really hard one, because I'm very lucky to have contacts in the Sahel and North Africa, and actually in Venezuela, but a lot of people don't. And there are amazing things on YouTube. There are also, this is a very strange thing, but I will, looking at songs, so the Tikenja Fakoly songs, I found out a huge amount about Tikenja Fakoly, and got some texts for A-level students by looking in the comments. So you trawling through the comments, and it takes a lot of time. That's a tip, looking in the comments of videos, but also looking when there are humanitarian disasters. Al Jazeera News often has really fantastic target language resources, and you can actually remove the subtitle button, the subtitle option, so you can have them, or obviously just play them as an audio recording. But Al Jazeera News is brilliant on that. Yes, guest, I will kindly share the videos. I will share them, the links, as soon as I can. And I think I've got 1 minute left. Does anyone have any other questions before we go and let someone who's more interesting than me talk? No, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for talking to me on the chat and listening. It's been lovely to read your comments, and I will, as I said, I'll put the resources in the resource section, and it's been an absolute pleasure to spend time with you this morning. Have a wonderful day. I hope your cover work was done properly, and that you have a wonderful weekend. All right, we will end there. Bye.